Hello friends and subscribers, hope you're all doing well. In this video I'm going to be talking about what would have happened if each Doctor had stayed for another series of Doctor Who. I'm only going to be talking about the modern series, so Christopher Eccleston, David Tennant, Matt Smith, Peter Capaldi, Jodie Whittaker. The classic Doctors, I'll do them in another video. So, yeah, we start off with Christopher Eccleston, of course, the Ninth Doctor in Series 1. And of course, he left after Series 1 because he didn't like the way he was being treated by the production team. And yeah, I don't blame him for leaving, personally. And I think there was a lot of disagreements between him and Russell T Davies. Like, Christopher Eccleston had his own ideas of what he wanted to do with his Doctor, while Russell T Davies had other ideas. But of course, there were plans that Eccleston would stay on for the second series. I mean, he did sign a contract. I don't know how many seasons he would have stayed for if he hadn't left. But in this What If, he's only going to stay for Series 2. So, yeah, let's say that the problems that he had behind the scenes in this, just imagine an alternative timeline. The problems that he had behind the scenes didn't happen at that particular time. So he'd stay on for one more series. He'd stay on for Series 2, but Series 2 would probably be when he starts to have the problems behind the scenes. And there are some episodes in Series 2 that Christopher Eccleston probably wouldn't like. I mean, there's stuff like Love and Monsters, Fear Her, which I can definitely see Christopher Eccleston being very critical towards those type of episodes. Even though me personally, I love those episodes. You know, I actually do enjoy those episodes, even though most people don't. But they're the sort of episodes that Christopher Eccleston would probably not like. So what if Christopher Eccleston stayed for Series 2? So this means Series 1 would have to end differently. So how would the Ninth Doctor save Rose without sacrificing himself? Well, the best that I can come up with is that he's able to convince Rose to let go of the power of the time vortex. She lets it leave her body, and then it goes back into the TARDIS. I know it's a bit anticlimactic, but it's the best I could come up with. She still collapses unconscious, but she's alive. And also in this alternative Series 2, I'm also going to have John Barrowman stay on as Captain Jack, which I do believe was the original plan. Because I think it would be cool to have a full series with that trio. Because it's a trio that I really loved that we didn't get much of. So Captain Jack, he still gets resurrected after being killed by the Dalek. That still happens in this alternative timeline. But but this time he gets to them in time before they leave in the TARDIS. So Jack helps the Doctor carry the unconscious Rose into the TARDIS, and then the episode ends there. So in the Christmas Invasion, they decide to take Rose home so that she can rest. So throughout this episode, Rose spends most of the episode in bed, just like the 10th Doctor did in our timeline in that episode. But Rose is the one who's unconscious throughout most of the episode. She's asleep. So the Doctor and Jack, basically in this one, they save the day without Rose. Another thing that would be different is the sword fight. I don't think the sword fight would happen, because I think that's more of a David Tennant thing. That's more of a 10th Doctor thing. I just don't think it's the sort of thing that the 9th Doctor would do. So it does kind of affect Series 3 slightly because the severed hand plays a big part in the show later on, but we'll get to that. So yeah, he deals with the Sycorax in a non-violent way. I think Jack is the one who's more likely to deal with them in a violent way. And he'd probably get killed by one of them, but end up coming back to life. Yeah, but by the end of the episode, Rose makes a recovery, and then she continues to travel with Jack and the Ninth Doctor. And then the rest of Series 2 would, I'd say it'd play out the same for the most part, but there would be some key differences, which I will explain. So in the episode New Earth, when Cassandra goes inside Rose's body, that would obviously still happen. But she also goes inside the Doctor's body as well. But with the Ninth Doctor, I don't think that's likely to happen, as I think Christopher Eccleston would just find it too silly, to be honest. So I think instead this will happen to Jack instead. Cassandra will go inside Jack's body, so which would be more likely. So that's the only difference with New Earth. And also the episode Tooth and Claw, where the Doctor puts on a Scottish accent. This was done because David Tennant is Scottish, but Christopher Eccleston isn't, so obviously the Ninth Doctor wouldn't put on a Scottish accent, but I think Jack would have the Scottish accent instead, because John Barrowman is originally from Scotland. So yeah. So that would be the difference. Another thing with Series 2, the Ninth Doctor, I think, would react differently to events in Series 2 than the 10th Doctor did. And there would also be no romance between the Doctor and Rose. You know, because that was more of a thing with the 10th Doctor. I just don't think that would happen with the Ninth Doctor. So that's another thing that would be different. And so yeah, apart from those key things, the series would still play out the same as it did. And then we come to the finale. So how would the Ninth Doctor regenerate? Well, best I can come up with, that while him and Rose are holding onto the clamps, while the Daleks are being sucked into the void, one of the Daleks manages to shoot the Doctor. And then he still says goodbye to Rose on Bad Wolf Bay via the hologram link. And then after saying goodbye, he then regenerates inside the TARDIS. So in this version, we don't actually have Donna appearing inside the TARDIS at the end of Doomsday. That doesn't happen until the beginning of Runaway Bride in this timeline. It just ends with the Ninth Doctor regenerating. And this timeline, you know, for the sake of this timeline, let's say the 10th Doctor is still David Tennant. But also, what would happen to Jack? Well, let's say Jack, he decides to stay behind on Earth to rebuild Torchwood, which would make more sense because he was the main character of the spin-off series. So yeah, he decides to stay behind and rebuild Torchwood. So this means the Runaway Bride would be David Tennant's first episode. The episode would still play out the same for the most part. The only difference is the Doctor would be suffering from post-regeneration effects. And maybe some amnesia. It's just something that happens when the Doctor regenerates. So yeah, this would happen, but apart from that, I don't think there would be much difference. Series 3 would still be exactly the same, apart from the severed hand not appearing in the 3-part finale. Although the severed hand played a big part in the Master turning the Doctor into an old man, because he needed the Doctor's biological code. But he also had the Lazarus technology and his laser screwdriver. But let's just say, for the sake of this alternate timeline, that he's still able to turn the Doctor into an old man without needing the severed hand. And then Series 4 would be the same for the most part, I think, with the exception of the finale. Like when, at the end of Stolen Earth, when when Rose is about to reunite with the Doctor. Of course, she never, in this timeline, she never met the 10th Doctor. She only knew the 9th Doctor. So just as she's about to reunite with him, she realizes that he looks. By the time she realizes that, because they're distance from each other, but it's only when they start to get closer to each other she realizes that he looks different. And by the time that happens, that the Dalek appears, and instead of shooting the Doctor, let's say it shoots Rose. So unfortunately, that means Rose will die in this alternative timeline. So that would be the cliffhanger for Stolen Earth. And that also means that the Meta-Crisis wouldn't happen in Journey's End. So that means the TARDIS wouldn't get thrown into the core of the Dalek ship. So yeah, Rose would unfortunately die, and then so that means that they wouldn't have that Dr. Donna thing. So would Donna decide to stay on with the Doctor? Let's say that after Series 4 she decides not to travel with the Doctor anymore due to after the Dalek invasion. Maybe she decides that the Dalek invasion was too much, it was too intense, and she decides to return home. So yeah, what should we do for a cliffhanger? Because I know Series 4 didn't have a cliffhanger anyway, but in this one there was actually a cliffhanger that was originally filmed, where two Cybermen appeared inside the TARDIS behind the Doctor. This was filmed, and you can actually find this alternative ending on YouTube. But it wasn't used. But let's say in this alternative version, that ending is used. And then we'd still have the 2009 specials, even though the 2009 specials were kind of... I mean, yes, they were done as a send-off for David Tennant, but let's say in this alternative timeline, they still happen anyway, because Russell T Davies would still leave as well, because even if David Tennant had stayed, Russell T Davies would have still left. So they're made as a farewell to Russell T Davies. Because obviously David Tennant is, in this timeline, he's staying for Series 5. So yeah, the next Doctor would be the same, and so would Planet of the Dead. Although Planet of the Dead is the episode where the 10th Doctor's regeneration is foreshadowed. So that's the only thing that would be different with this version of Planet of the Dead. The episode would still be the same, but without his death being foreshadowed. And Waters of Mars, the Time Lord Victorious thing would still happen, as, I mean, yeah, obviously the only thing that would be different is that, again, all the references to his impending regeneration wouldn't be mentioned at all. But I think we'd still have the Time Lord Victorious. He did that because when he doesn't have a companion with him, that's what causes him to go too far. If he'd had a companion with him, it wouldn't have happened. So yeah, he'd still be travelling alone. So yeah, that still happens, but of course in the end of time he decides to redeem himself for his actions in Waters of Mars. So, end of time. So how would the 10th Doctor survive the end of time? Let's say that Wilfrid doesn't go into the radiation chamber, so that the Doctor wouldn't have to sacrifice himself. Because the reason Wilfrid went in there in the first place was to save one of the workers that was trapped in there. But let's say that he's too late to save this man anyway, and he dies. So the 10th Doctor survives. He survives unscathed. And then, yeah, so the episode basically ends after he returns Wilfrid home. So we don't get him visiting his companions. And then on to Series 5. And obviously Stephen Moffat did try to persuade Tennant to stay for Series 5. And I know he had his ideas, but rather than using Moffat's idea, I'm going to use my own. I'm going to use my own idea here. So rather than the 10th Doctor crash landing in Amelia's back garden, he lands outside the house normally after receiving a distress signal in the TARDIS, and the distress signal was obviously Amelia praying for someone to come and fix the crack in her bedroom wall. So the 10th Doctor helps her. So yeah, the opening episode would still play out the same. It probably wouldn't be called the 11th hour though. It would probably be called the 10th hour, because it was called the 11th hour because that was a play on words because it introduced the 11th Doctor. But let's say it's the 10th hour or Invasion of the Atraxi, something like that. Whatever you want to call it. So yeah, Amy would go on to travel with the 10th Doctor throughout Series 5, although yeah, it'd play out the same, but the 10th Doctor again would react differently to events in Series 5. And another thing that would be different was in the Vampires of Venice episode, when the 11th Doctor shows up at Rory's stag do. He bursts out of the cake. That's not something the 10th Doctor would do, I don't think. But apart from that, I think the episode would be the same. And also the scene in Flesh and Stone where Amy seduces the Doctor. The Doctor kind of does return his affections slightly, but the 10th Doctor wouldn't. I think Amy would still have feelings for the 10th Doctor, but it would be just like the thing with Martha, like she has feelings for him, but he doesn't have feelings for her. But she manages to sort of snap out of that once she realises that she loves Rory. So that means obviously the 10th Doctor would regenerate in the finale, so in the Big Bang. So how would the 10th Doctor regenerate? And another question is, how would the TARDIS interior change? Because Stephen Moffat also said that if Tennant had stayed another series, he wouldn't have changed the title sequence, the theme song, or the TARDIS interior. It would have stayed the same as it was in Series 4. Well, let's say that the 10th Doctor's regeneration is caused when he's sealed inside the Pandorica. Let's say that being sealed inside the Pandorica, it mortally weakens his body. And the TARDIS interior is changed after it's blown up by the crack in time. So that's the best I can come up with. I actually don't think it's a bad idea, to be honest. And then during the Amy and Rory's wedding scene, the 10th Doctor lands the TARDIS in the middle of the wedding, and it's the brand new TARDIS. And then the dying 10th Doctor steps out because he wants to see Amy and Rory just one last time, and then he collapses. And then they help him into the TARDIS, and then he basically explains to them what's just about to happen, and then he regenerates into the 11th Doctor, who, in this timeline, he's still going to be played by Matt Smith, because, I love Matt Smith as the 11th Doctor, so yes, let's say it's still Matt Smith. And then that would affect the Christmas special slightly, the Christmas Carol, so this would be Matt Smith's first episode. So, again, for the most part, the episode would still play out the same, except in this version, Amy and Rory will not be on their honeymoon. They would stay with the Doctor to look after him. So the Doctor would be suffering from post-regeneration effects in the episode, but it doesn't stop him from saving the day. And of course, by the end of the episode, once he's fully recovered, he then drops off Amy and Rory at their honeymoon. And then Series 6 would be exactly the same. And so would Series 7, although in this timeline, I'm also going to have Christopher Eccleston return as the 9th Doctor in the 50th anniversary special. So that means at the end of Series 7, in Name of the Doctor, it's the Ninth Doctor that shows up at the end rather than John Hurt's War Doctor. It means we won't have the War Doctor in this timeline, but hey. So the Day of the Doctor would still be exactly the same, but just with the Ninth Doctor instead of the War Doctor. And we obviously won't get the Peter Capaldi cameo either, where we see the glimpse of his eyes. Yeah, we won't see that either, because at this point Matt Smith isn't leaving in this timeline. He stays on for Series 8. So then we come to the Time of the Doctor, Christmas special. So how would the 11th Doctor survive the episode? Because the only reason he regenerated in this episode was due to old age, because this was the end of his original regeneration cycle. But in this timeline, however, the 10th Doctor, of course, didn't regenerate twice and keep the same face, and the War Doctor doesn't exist in this alternative timeline, so this is still his 11th incarnation, so, you know, he still has 2 more left of this original cycle. So let's say, yeah, he still stays on the town called Christmas, you know, to protect it. So it'd still play out the same, and he still stays on there for a really long time, but he still leaves Clara behind on Earth to keep her safe, kind of like the Ninth Doctor did in Parting of the Ways. But then by the end of the episode, they reunite. But yeah, and the Doctor doesn't age in the episode. He doesn't start to die from old age. He survives the episode. That's the only difference. So they both survive the episode unscathed. And then Series 8, so I mean the first episode would be changed slightly, because we wouldn't have a newly regenerated 12th Doctor, we'd still have the 11th Doctor. So that's the only thing that would be different in the first episode. But the rest of Series 8 would play out the same, but obviously, again, the 11th Doctor would react differently to the events in Series 8. And I do know Stephen Moffat's idea was that Series 8 was originally going to be about Trenzalore. So let's say that it's still the same as our Series 8, but let's say that Missy is connected with the Trenzalore story arc. Because I think it would make more sense for the 11th Doctor's character arc to end on Trenzalore. So let's say that Missy is connected with Trenzalore in this alternative Series 8. And obviously the Doctor and Clara's relationship would be different, because she had a different relationship with the 12th Doctor than what she did with the 11th. So let's say, you know, they're still you know, have the same sort of friendship they did in Series 7B. So, yeah. But how would the 11th Doctor regenerate in the finale? Well, let's say that he gets wounded by a Cyberman in the scene at the end when they're in the cemetery, when he's talking to Missy and also Danny Pink, who's partially converted into a Cyberman. Because, yeah, let's say Danny Pink is trying to stop himself, but then eventually the Cyberman is trying to, it takes him over, and then he eventually, let's say he tries to kill Clara, he shoots at her, but the 11th Doctor steps in and he gets wounded instead, and he saves Clara. So let's say Clara helps him into the TARDIS, and then he regenerates into the 12th Doctor, who would still be played by Peter Capaldi. And then that means Peter Capaldi's first episode would be Last Christmas. So again, the episode would still be the same, but with a newly regenerated 12th Doctor suffering from post-regeneration effects. And then Series 9 would play out the same. So would Series 10, except for the ending. Obviously, the 12th Doctor wouldn't regenerate in the finale. Obviously, we'd still have the departure of Bill and Nardole, but the 12th Doctor would survive. Let's say he manages to destroy all the Cybermen without one of them electrocuting him. So that means the episode probably wouldn't be called The Doctor Falls. It would probably be called something else. Because it was called The Doctor Falls for a reason. And then when we go into the Christmas special, which probably it wouldn't be Twice Upon a Time, because the whole purpose of that episode was the parallel between the regenerations of the First Doctor and the 12th Doctor. But let's say it still has the same basic plot as Twice Upon a Time. Like, they still go into the Doctor still lands near the World War. He materialises near the World War I trenches and rescues the British captain, who's played by Mark Gatiss. So let's say Mark Gatiss is his one-off companion in this episode, and let's say maybe he still meets the First Doctor. So the episode will probably be called Once Upon a Time rather than Twice Upon a Time. So he'd still meet the First Doctor at the end of Series 10. So yeah, the episode would play out the same, but of course we'd still see the First Doctor regenerate at the end, but not the 12th Doctor. So yeah, that's because I liked that episode actually. So Peter Capaldi stays for series 11, which I do believe Chris Chibnall did actually. I think he did ask Peter Capaldi about staying on another series. So yeah, Peter Capaldi stays on for series 11, and obviously the first episode, it wouldn't be called The Woman Who Fell to Earth. It would probably be called Man Who Fell to Earth. Although the Doctor wouldn't fall from the sky because nothing would happen to him at the end of the Christmas special. So it'll have to have a completely different title. Although it would be cool if it was Man Who Fell to Earth, because Peter Capaldi is a David Bowie fan. It's getting quite dark in here. So yeah, obviously we wouldn't have a newly regenerated 13th Doctor in the first episode. And obviously he wouldn't lose the TARDIS, he'd still have the TARDIS with him. So, and he'd still take on Graham, Ryan and Yaz as companions, but I think he'd be more cautious at taking on new companions after what happened to Bill in Series 10. So yeah, the 12th Doctor would obviously have a different relationship with Graham, Ryan and Yaz than the 13th Doctor did. Completely different, and he'd react differently to events in the series. And also the episode The Witchfinders would be completely different, because in this one they think that the Doctor is a witch. But obviously, because the 13th Doctor is a female, of course, so they think she's a witch. But obviously with the 12th Doctor, that would have to be changed completely. Obviously, in this version, the Doctor won't be treated as a witch. So, in the last episode, in the finale, how would the 12th Doctor regenerate? Well, I honestly don't really remember. I've only watched Series 11 twice. I watched it when it was originally broadcast, and I have rewatched the DVD of it, but yeah, I actually don't really remember the episode. I probably should have watched it before doing this. But let's say, I can't remember who the adversary was in that episode, but whoever it is, maybe the 12th Doctor is mortally wounded when confronting the adversary, and he's, say, sacrificed himself to save his companions, and then they help him into the TARDIS, and then he regenerates into Jodie Whittaker. So that means Resolution, which is the 2019 New Year's Day special. This would be Jodie Whittaker's first episode. So it'd still be the same, but with a newly regenerated 13th Doctor. So series 12 and 13 would still be the same. I think we'd still get the 2022 specials. Although I can't really see Jodie Whittaker staying on after Chris Chibnall leaves, to be honest. So let's say she still regenerates in Power of the Doctor. So that means she only gets 2 seasons, because it would affect the 60th anniversary specials a lot. And I like the 60th anniversary specials as they are. You know, they just wouldn't work with a different Doctor. So Jodie only gets 2 seasons, but hey, in this timeline, Christopher Eccleston only got 2 seasons as well. So it's not like she's the odd one out. So David Tennant would still be the 14th Doctor, and Ncuti Gatwa would still be the 15th Doctor. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm sorry it was a bit long. But yeah, I tried to keep my videos as short as possible, but there was just a lot to talk about in this one. And yeah, this video is just for a bit of fun. I'm not trying to change history here. I'm happy, you know, for the way things turned out in the real timeline. Although I would like to have seen more of Christopher Eccleston. Apart from that, I'm happy with the way things have turned out. So yeah, not trying to rewrite history. It's just a bit of harmless fun. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Give it a thumbs up if you did. Subscribe for more content. Click the bell so you don't miss out on an upload. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you again in another video. Take care.